Since the last state election last year, stability has been the catch cry of the Labor-Green government in Tasmania. But in reality, that's been far from the truth. The cabinet reshuffle forced earlier this week was the third since December. Two senior ministers, David Bartlett and Lynn Thorpe, have gone this week. Despite resigning on Wednesday, the former Premier, David Bartlett, had said he would stay on the back bench for a while to finish up some unexplained projects. But under pressure today, he resigned from Parliament effective immediately. It's a chaotic political atmosphere and it's starting to have an impact not just on government activity, but business confidence as well. Martin Cudahy reports.
I believe a Labor-Green government remains the best hope for the future of our economy and our state.
It's becoming a regular gathering. Labor and Green ministers assembling at Government House for yet another new-look cabinet swearing in. With Lynn Thorpe and David Bartlett gone, there's new faces and new portfolios and new uncertainties, which makes for nervous onlookers.
No, unstable government is not an area where investors and or their financiers want to invest in. So in other words, there could be projects which the companies themselves are looking to invest in, but when they go further afield to gain finance, they find that the door's closed.
It's the third cabinet reshuffle since December, and there's growing concern across Tasmania that government instability will transfer through to business. Tim Penny runs a successful architecture firm in central Hobart.
The construction industry in Tasmania is significantly slowing, and it's slowing very quickly.
The firm of six does a lot of work for the state government, but Tim Penny says his business, like so many others, is adversely affected when there's change at the top.
What it does, Martin, is it slows up the approval processes primarily, that it takes a couple of months for ministers to come up to speed, and for any competent minister, that they then need to be able to understand how the capital and the infrastructure and the costs are flowing through their department.
It's a very short-sighted view if you think that you can have all of these portfolios and juggle them and still get the outcomes that you want, and at the same time spruik about downsizing a public service.
Dixie Emerton is the head of the Tasmanian Centre for Industry, an employer assistance group. Members have told her unstable government is deterring investment.
Do you have concerns over whether the state government can manage its portfolio?
Certainly our members do have concerns. We don't feel that it can continue as it is.
The business climate is uncertain, with a wind down in construction, retail spending falling, tourism feeling the pinch, house prices shaky, and threats to public sector employment. Dixie Emerton believes instability is the last thing business needs.
We have probably over the last 3 months spent more time downsizing and closing than we have in actually helping them to develop and expand.
The construction industry is seen as a lead indicator, and what we're seeing now is a significant contracting, and it's affecting anyone associated with the building, so it has a big impact.
But if business is nervous about the government, there isn't yet vocal support for a change to the party, which is the traditional friend of private enterprise.
Given the opposition at the moment, the Liberal opposition, would you prefer to see them in Parliament or would you prefer the status quo?
Well, as an apolitical organisation, the TCCI, our bottom line is we want stable government.
Tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry in Tasmania. Thousands of visitors flock to the island state, especially over the summer months. Not only does Tourism Tasmania have a new chairman and CEO, there's now a new minister.
Of all the times for this to happen, literally weeks before a horror budget, we've suddenly got to deal with a new minister and go back to square one after weeks of engaging with what was a really capable and effective tourism minister, Michelle O'Byrne.
The industry believes there was no reason to change the minister and is fearful the tourism marketing budget will be cut as a massive drop in GST revenue further erodes Tasmania's bottom line. That means valuable dollars may well be spent interstate or abroad.
What we've been used to is a government that's worked closely with the industry and grown the industry, and the industry's benefited from a cooperative relationship with the government, and kind of leaves you wondering about where we sit in the scheme of things after this week's events.
It's small and medium-sized businesses that rely on the government marketing spend. The fact is, it's not just business that's shuffling nervously while watching the merry-go-round of ministers. Unions, one of Labor's traditional power bases, are also fed up with the constant chopping and changing.
We do have to continue to explain the same issues, although recently we were actually visiting a number of politicians to talk about our issues because we felt like we weren't being heard anyway. Thank you.
Education Union President Leanne Wright has been in the top job for 3 years. Nick McKim will be the third Education Minister she's had to work with.
We have to know that what we've explained to the Minister has been understood, and to have to go back and do that time and time again is very difficult.
Because there's been so much change within the portfolio, the union is taking somewhat unusual measures. It's running to any politician who'll listen.
We generally inform other politicians anyway, and we're almost at a point where we're feeling like that's a good idea because you never know who might be your next Minister for Education.
So while the new ministers get acquainted with their new roles, business will continue to trade. And there's one message they want the government to listen to. Keep it stable.
The reality is if they don't start turning things around and looking at what business need to do to build in this state, then I don't think they're going to stay in power.